All right, welcome to episode 9 of Education in Color. I'm joined here today with a wonderful guest. Uche, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, my name is Uche Njoku, and also known as the Sneaker Principal. I always find that funny, but also known as the Sneaker Principal. So.
Thank you. And Uche, I guess could you give a little bit of a background history into your current role and then your experience with the education system?
Sure. Presently, I'm the Vice President of Program Partnership at PRACTICE. We provide academic support to schools, push-in services. We do virtual tutoring, and also customize supports for schools. And prior to that, I was a principal for 6 years in the DOE, 3 years as a high school principal in Brooklyn, 3 years as a middle school principal in the Bronx. Then prior to that, 7 years as an AEP, and prior to that, teaching dean. So for a total of 17 years. And plus 1 year in Las Vegas as a elementary school assistant principal.
So I guess what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I'm not going to ask any questions about that 1 year staying over there.
Yeah, that's for another show completely.
But that's the perfect segue into the first question, which is, what has your educational experience been like in the DOE, in the various roles that you've held, and how have you felt about your tenure thus far?
So it's interesting because I always felt like my career in the DOE was an accident. I was trying to get a position in Los Angeles. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I was trying to get a position as a substitute teacher. And at that point in time, this was 2004, there was a hiring freeze. Mm-hmm. So I had friends of mine from college, but I went to University of Rochester, New York, who were like, bro, come to New York, And I thought to myself, you know what? New York City, that could be fun. And I was told about the New York City Teaching Fellows. And it was a 2-year commitment. And I figured, okay, I could do the 2-year commitment and find my way back to Los Angeles. And I applied for the program and I didn't get in. And I thought to myself, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to wait for the hiring freeze to be lifted in Los Angeles. And I remember I went away on vacation with my family, came back home, and there was a letter just weeks later saying, hey, pretty much it was saying, hey, are you still interested? So apparently, I guess the number of people who were accepted didn't reciprocate their acceptance into the program. So I was rejected, but then I guess by default, accepted. So I was like, okay, I mean, why not? So I came to New York, and I really believed it was going to be a 2-year deal. And my first interview, I think it's still the same way now with teaching fellows. You have to find your own position. Mm-hmm. I thought I was coming to New York City and they were going to be like, here's the school you're going to go to. Uh-huh. And mind you, I wasn't accepted initially, so I missed all the steps. I just got a letter saying, if you're still interested, show up. I showed up and people were telling me, remember, you don't have a job yet? You have to find your own job. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what are you talking about, find your own job? And there was one more hiring fair, and somebody told me, trust me, at this point in time, it's the schools, the selection is horrible. Mm-hmm. So what I decided to do was this. Old school, this is before people were really into emails. Mm-hmm. This is 2005. I literally got on a computer and I think I wrote a cover letter to every high school, middle school in the Bronx. And I had a stack of envelopes through in the mail, and I had about 5 responses. My first 3 interviews: Discovery High School at the Walton campus, Bronx Leadership Academy, and I'll be honest with you, I cannot remember the third school now. But the first 2 schools immediately made me an offer. Right. And but Discovery High School, Scott Goldner, who was the principal, loved this man, gave him my first chance. And he can't get in trouble for this now. He's long left the DOE. But we had an interview, and I was supposed to be a special education fellow for the Bronx. And if you know anything about education in New York City, that's probably one of the toughest jobs and one of the toughest boroughs. So he gave me the opportunity. He was like, listen, I want you to be one of my special ed teachers. But then, so I'm thinking, okay, all right. Then as the interview is concluding, he says, one more thing. I'm looking at your resume here. It says here you're in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah. He was like, how you feel about discipline? I said, it's necessary. He's like, my AP is going on maternity leave. I don't think she's going to come back. And I really need a dean. I didn't even know what a dean was. Because that's not a title or role in school in California. And at least when I was in school, he was like, you handle all the discipline and all the other stuff. And I was like, that sounds very administrative. Like, I'm a first year teacher. Like, is this even okay? He's like, trust me, I think you'd be good at this. And he was like, but then again, I'm pushing back. But dude, I'm a first year teacher. He's like, we'll work it out. So I remember going back and I told him I'll think about it. And I remember going to my teaching fellows class, I think that evening. And I told my professor, I think I got a job offer. He wants me to be the dean. And she's like, that's awesome. But then she tells me, don't tell anybody, don't tell the program this, because I don't think you're supposed to do that. And here I am, my first job in the DOE. I was a dean at a high school. And from that point, my career went a very different path, because my first couple of years I was teaching, but not really, because I was dealing with, if you're familiar with Walton High School back then, it was a very chaotic space, a lot of gang issues, a lot of things. So I spent a lot of my time dealing with discipline and things like that as a first year teacher. And by the end of my second year, I had a principal who I met my first year at another school who said, hey, you want to come work for me? And the opportunity just worked itself out for me to take that position. So I went from my first 2 years as a dean at a high school, then my third year as the dean at a middle school. Then from there, I was there for 1 year, then went to another school with this principal, John Barnes, who's a good friend of mine. And he's leading schools in the other outside of DOE. And from there, everything was just almost like that's all she wrote. From that point, it was just, I found myself as in the Con Fellows as an ally, and next thing you know, I was at Columbia, for the Summer Principals Academy, and that was just it. Like it's funny because if I'm really honest, I didn't really get the chance to really be a classroom teacher. I learned pedagogy and teaching as an administrator.
I see.
Because I had to kind of reverse engineer what good teaching looks like. So observations and walking to classrooms and co-teaching. And I remember being an AP and asking my principal, like, is it okay if I teach a class this semester? And for a couple of years, I taught as a dean, as an AP, I taught every year at least 1 or 2 classes, because I knew I needed to strengthen myself as a instructional leader. But my story in the DOE was just one that was very not typical. It was atypical. So,
and I'm curious because you mentioned the military experience. So, how do you think your experience in the military shaped your pedagogical philosophy?
I have a very no-nonsense approach to teaching and learning. I'm definitely not one to be in kids' faces screaming, yelling, and stuff like that. But I remember being in boot camp, and the thing that stuck with me the most from boot camp was this whole notion of I won't let you give up. Like let's throw out, like, those of you who are like, Marine Corps, and you're thinking about like Full Metal Jacket, throw that out the window. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of that stuff is real. But the one thing I remember about my time in the military, and I also went to a military school, I also was in ROTC in high school, was how much those who were training me wouldn't let me give up. And even if they were in my face, there was always time for them to put me to the side, like, what's going on here? You can do this. I work on this thing with you, and I'll keep pushing and pushing, but I know you can do it. And that was an approach that I know worked. So when I became dean at a high school where I was being told, the biggest problem we have is all the gangs in the building, and it was, listen, I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in Inglewood, California. In Inglewood, I went to Inglewood High School. There was 2 gangs. There was Bloods, and then there was factions of La M, 13. So we had Inglewood 13, and that was more the Hispanic gang and then the Black gang. There was no Crips because it just didn't work like that. I came to New York City and I walked into this building and I was being told this, we have Crips, we have Bloods, we have Latin Kings, we have DD30, we have Patria, we have DDP. And I was like, how do all these gangs, how? But I didn't understand that. But then I saw the kids, and some of them were friends, some of them were not friends, some of them lived in the same building. So the thing with my military experience, I knew, one thing I learned is this: like for kids to be successful, there has to be a certain level of discipline, but not discipline in the sense of disciplining them, but teaching them to be disciplined in their actions and the way they move. And one thing I can say from the military taught me is how to be disciplined in the way I handle myself, and then having a very clear focus on really pushing my kids or my students to really, really know what they want and being able to help them attain that. So that whole never give up attitude, that whole never give up mindset has always driven me all the way through my career in education. So, and I'll be honest with you, I think it's funny because when I was in the Marines, you couldn't have told me that experience would have such an impact in who I became as a school leader. But like Steve Jobs says, you can only, what do you say about connecting the dots backwards?
Right.
So being able to connect back, I'm like, wow, but those experiences I kind of replicated in my career with every school that I worked at, even with kindergartners, just being able to help them see structure. How does the day look like? And I never given up on them.
And, I think that's very important. You mentioned the structure and the disciplining, because oftentimes when kids, they don't really have a proper sense of, let's say, a schedule or a routine. They kind of do things as they're told. But eventually those translate into their adult habits and how they view life in general. So having that type of structure and having that routine when they're older instills within them. So for example, I had a kid I had two kids actually. They were brothers. They had the same father, different mothers. And one brother was very organized, always on top of his work. He did everything properly. And not to say that the other brother, didn't do things properly, but he wouldn't be as organized. He wouldn't be on top of things as much as his other brother, but it was because of the routines and the systems they had in place. So when one brother went home, the mom was like, okay, no phone, no nothing, get your work done, and then you can have this much playtime. If I got a call from your teachers, if I got this, I got whatever, you don't get that playtime. Now you get it taken away, and then when you can prove that you can earn the privilege of playtime, because it's not something that's just given to you, it's something that you need to earn, you can have it. Whereas the other brother would go home and he wouldn't have that structure. And then that lack of structure is what led him ultimately to kind of be astray sometimes. However, then when he came to the classroom, I had my own structure. It was like organized chaos, don't get me wrong, but it was a structure of, okay, we are going to spend the first 10 minutes talking about our feelings, what's going on in our lives, our days, etc. Then we'll work. And then if we all finish our work early, we can talk amongst each other again in like a Socratic type of seminar about whatever topic you guys want to talk about. That structure really empowered this other brother who didn't have a routine prior, to the point where his mom was telling me, what did you do to him? And I was like, oh, I didn't do nothing to him. He did it all by himself. I'm not forcing him to do anything. He just really found joy in that structure. And so I want to ask you, what was your educational experience like growing up? And have you ever had a male teacher of color growing up?
Yes. Unfortunately, I have a cheat code for that. I'm Nigerian, born in Nigeria, and I spent time going to school in Nigeria. So I had Black teachers. And interestingly enough, my experience in Nigeria, there were way more men teaching than there were women.
Interesting.
Which is kind of the reverse here.
Right.
So yeah, I did have all my tutors that I think before the show started, we talked about my experience with tutors. All my tutors are all males, all Black males, and that was very important because. Not to say that children can't learn from various genders and races, but for me as a child, especially during that time frame, my father wasn't there. My father was here in America working, sending money back home to us in Nigeria at the time. And I remember those teachers that I had, those men who, the way they carried themselves, the way they spoke, the high expectations they set for me were very, very important. And I'll tell you this, when I came to America for middle school, I went to La Tijera Middle School, and it was a diverse population of teachers, men, women, different races. But the teachers that stood out for me, I'll tell you this, 8th grade, I had a teacher, English, Mr. Bailey. I don't know where he is today, and if I could find this man, I'll give him the biggest hug in the world. But at that point in time, I was being bullied really badly. I was the immigrant kid from Nigeria. Back then, I was still considered exotic because I was the only African kid in my school.
Right.
And I remember just kids, the jokes and all this kind of nonsense. But I wasn't the kind of kid who got bullied and I just kind of crawled into the corner. I would fight you. that was just me. Listen, we're going to fight. And I was little. I was really little. And I got my butt kicked all the time. But it was just I think it's just one of those things, my pride just wouldn't stand for it, But I remember one day I got into a fight. And what happened was this kid in the classroom, he frisbeed the history textbook across the room.
Some WWE type shit.
Yeah. And the funny thing, I'm sitting in the classroom, the way the classroom was structured was like it was like a square U, right? So I'm sitting on the edge right here. So he's across from me.
Okay.
And I'm doing my work, and something said look up, and I just saw the book. Bow. And I was like, what's his name? Waterboy. Bobby Boucher. I ran to this kid. We started swinging, fighting, and somebody grabbed me from behind, and I thought it was one of the other kids. So I thought it was the meanest elbow, and I hit the teacher in the mouth. And this teacher, Miss Hughes, listen, amazing woman. I loved her to begin with before that moment. I loved her even more because I know I got her good. Like I think I loosened the tooth. And she begged for me not to be suspended. She was like, it was not his fault. And I remember feeling, I cried. I was crying so hard because I felt bad for hurting her. And I think I got suspended for like a week. I came back and I was in Mr. Bailey's class for English. And Miss Hughes was my social studies teacher. And I remember Mr. Bailey, as the class was walking out, he was like, Mr. Njoku, give me a second. And I was like, okay. The class walked out. And listen, I know this is going to sound really crazy. You're going to be like, this is, physical abuse or corporal punishment, whatever the case is. I didn't see it that way. This was 1989. And I remember Mr. Bailey saying, come here. And he grabbed me by my shirt and threw me against the wall. And he said to me, what are you doing? And I was sitting there I was frozen. He was like, what are you doing? That woman loves you so much that she begged for you not to be suspended. Stop fighting. Stop fighting. You get thicker skin. I just remember saying that. And Mr. Bay was huge. Like he was a big man. He was a big man. And if I was 5 feet, I'd be shocked if I was 5 feet. I was super short. I didn't get my growth spot to college, and I'm barely 5'9". And I just remember those words echoed with me, and I never fought again. And I don't know if those words would have resonated with me if it came from anyone else.
Right.
Because it was almost like the lion talking to a lion cub, and he was just like, you need to stop. And yeah, Mr. Bailey, like a black man who took the time in that moment to say something to me that moved me to my core. Mind you, this is 8th grade. And I can tell you right now, I'm 46. I've not gotten into a physical altercation with another human being with the purpose of violence since that moment, because Mr. Bailey told me to stop fighting.
That's crazy, because that reminds me of I think there was another moment I had a similar type of thing where when I was in kindergarten, it's gonna sound so bad. When I was in kindergarten, a kid walked over my chair, like hopped over it, skipped over it. I don't know what type of irrational anger I had. I went up to the kid, I smacked them, right? Then they put me in timeout in the corner. The whole class is talking. The teacher's talking. They're like, oh, we should call the president on him. Da da da. I'm thinking I'm gonna go to Guantanamo Bay. I'm a kindergarten. I'm scared shitless. I'm like, oh my god, that's it. I'm done. I'm gonna go to solitary confinement. But then and mind you, all my teachers at that point were women. And there was only one male in the building. He wasn't even a teacher. He was, I think, the janitor. He then came to the room, and the reason why I knew him is because prior to that, I don't know when, I think I pissed my pants. And, he had to come clean up, and I was sitting there for 45 minutes because I kept raising my hand. The teacher said, no, no, no. And then eventually when they said, okay, you can go now, I said, I don't need to go anymore. But
it's already been done.
But he knew me because of that instance. And then he came because they were asking him to clean up, I guess, the tears that I was just shedding at that point. But then he came and then he took me out of the classroom, and then, we were just talking about everything, and he asked me how I was feeling. And I told him, I feel really bad. And of course, right now I have a better way to vocalize it. Because I know when I was a kid, I was probably quivering with my quivering lip, crying, just saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm never going to do it again. But then he went and he told the teacher, like, look, this is a kid. He didn't really know any better. He doesn't even know what happened. Let's, instead of, having an environment where everyone's berating him after the fact is done, giving a negative reinforcement to that, let's just say, okay, mistakes happen, apologize to the student, which I did do after he told me to apologize to the student, and then work on a constructive way to not have this happen again. Mm-hmm. Now, at that time, I was so awestruck because as a kid, I don't think you really look at anyone else in the building other than teachers, administrators, and principals as people, so to speak. Yeah. You think like they're fixtures in the building. But then after that, I realized, I'm like, wow, this dude wasn't even my teacher. He was the janitor in the school, but he took the time and effort to actually talk to me and then talk to the teacher, who I'm surprised, like the teacher didn't have like the pedagogical knowledge to be like, negative reinforcement is not good. Let's do some positive reinforcement. But that just goes to show how much of an impact sometimes that one figure will have in your life. Just some words that they'll say, or just an act of kindness that really sticks with you for God knows how long. Because I have no business remembering this from kindergarten, but I do. And to this day, I'm always going to remember it.
I really believe that we often don't consider the power of, especially when it comes with boys. Mm. Like, I love my mother, I love my aunties, but the things that were said to me that have stuck to me the longest have been what's come from my uncles and from my father. And just from men. Because when a man tells a young boy something, it's from experience. It's from, I know what you're going through, down to the emotions of it, the feeling of it, because the hormones that run through our bodies are the same.
Right.
And the other thing too is, it's one thing. So I used to have kids who said this to me all the time, Mr. Uche Njoku, you can be scary. And I'm like, what you mean I'm scared? They're like, yeah, it's just sometimes you get this look in your eye, and we just know you're not playing. I'm like, what look? They're like, I don't know, just like this. You start twitching, and then we'd be like, yo, everybody chill. And it's funny, because I'm like, what are you talking about? But the thing is, and this is coming from boys, and it's innate in us. They just know, like, okay, this is serious. When Mr. Bailey told me, stop fighting, I didn't question it. How old was I? Like 10, 11? I didn't question it. I was just kind of like, okay. And did the bullying stop? It didn't stop. I knew I could fight. The kids knew I can fight. They knew I wasn't scared of fighting. But it was like, Mr. Billy told me to stop. He told me to stop. And it's funny because I saw Mr. Bailey again my senior year. He was filling in for a teacher at the high school. I hadn't seen him since the 8th grade. Hey, I'm a senior, and life is good. I got into all my colleges. I've committed to University of Rochester. I'm playing football. Everything is. I'm not that little tiny kid who was being bullied anymore. And I saw him, and I remember he was actually somebody in one of my classes. I remember being like, "Yo, it's Mr. Bailey," and he looked at me. He was like, "Njoku." I was like, "Mr. Bailey." He was like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing good." And in that moment, guess what I felt? The same thing I felt when I was that little kid. Yeah. The only difference now, I was grateful. But I don't know why in my brain at that moment in time, I was like, this is a pivotal moment. It had to happen where I connected with him again so he could see who I had become.
Right.
So I think I love all my teachers I've ever worked with. I always love them. I love them. I love what they do. I love the commitment to the students. But one thing I can say is this: I've many times pulled in custodial staff, who I've seen, like, you have connection with this kid. Yeah, do me a favor, can you talk to this kid for me? And they're like, yeah, I got you. And they're like, yo, bro, let me sit down, let's talk. And it's amazing to me when I see, like one of my janitors sitting face to face with a kid just talking. Like, yo, what's going on? And the kid is like, telling them, they're talking to them. Because often this adult is like, I'm from the same neighborhood. Like, I know, I'm from the same corners, like, all these different things. And the kid, it's just a space of trust there, So, yeah, I think is a lot of times some of our unsung heroes are those support staff in the building, especially men. Because often let's be honest here. When you go into more schools, what are the roles given to men?
It's funny you mentioned that because one of my colleagues ages ago, I think we were studying this in the fact that in a lot of schools, like elementary and middle school, men are typically in power roles, or like it's a dean or a janitor, or not in the pedagogical role.
Not in the
because
pedagogical role.
typically we're not looked at as nurturing compared to our female counterparts. So then the crazy part is, though, we can be super nurturing. I was 100% nurturing with my kids, but we also know that, okay, when they've crossed a line or they've crossed a boundary, like I told my kids, I'm friendly, I'm not going to be your friend, because that thin line is what I guess spurs some kids to actually push the boundaries and push the envelope on, okay, this teacher I can walk all over, this teacher I can't. Because I remember for my kids specifically, I would tell them, yo, shut up. They'd shut up. Another teacher tried that. They're like, you're not Mr. Kabir. You can't tell to shut up. And it was just straight up because of the bond that I built with them. And, to go back to your previous question, it's interesting though, right? Again, in the buildings, you don't really see men in a lot of these pedagogical roles. And even when I was a teacher, surprisingly, in the building, we kind of had like a 1-to-1 ratio. Half the staff of the pedagogical staff were women and the other half were men. And the students who didn't feel comfortable talking, to some of the teachers were very, very comfortable in talking to the guy teachers, especially some of the kids who just wanted to fight all the time. I had one kid who, for the life of him, he could not stop punching every other kid. But we had a boxing club after school. So what I would do is I'd get like the mitts and have him punch the mitts, and I'd quiz him while he's doing that. And that would be his way of letting out that outlet, that his expression, without, hurting another kid. But then I also tell him, like, look, hey, if you punch this, that's fine. You punching another kid, that's not fine, right? That's like me boxing or like going to the gym and like lifting weights, and that's fine. But if I'm not picking up a weight and throwing it at somebody in the street, then, that's attempted murder.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny. I have two stories where when it happened, I was kind of like, why? Why is this happening this way? I was an assistant principal, and one of my teachers who taught social studies, amazing teacher. He still teaches in the DOE to this day. And I remember he comes to my office and says, hey, he's like, bro, we gotta talk. I'm like, what's going on? And to give you proper context, he's a white male. He comes to me, he's like, and we've known each other for years. He's like, bro, we gotta talk. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I don't even know how to say this. He's like, a student came to me and told me something, and I don't know what to do with this. I'm like, so I'm thinking of the worst, like every worst case scenario in my brain. He's like, so-and-so came and told me that she's pregnant and wants me to tell her mom for her.
Oh, that's crazy.
And I was like,
yeah.
Okay. First of all, stop. She's pregnant? Okay. And he was like, no, but she wants me. And I told her, like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. He's like, and she's like, no. I'm not telling my mom. You need to tell her. So he said to her, what if me and Mr. Njoku tell her? And she's like, that's fine, but I need you there. And it was the most bizarre thing, because of course we got the guidance counselor in there and everything else. And it was the guidance counselor who explained, she has a high level of trust in you, in social studies teacher, high level of trust. He's like, but how? She doesn't participate. She comes to class. She's quiet. She doesn't say anything. And she was like, but for whatever reason, in her mind, you're the person. You're her person. Right. And she looked at me, she's like, and Njoku, you're number 2, because she agreed for you to be there. Yeah. I'm like, but wouldn't it be easier if it's a female? He's like, that's what she chose. And I remember sitting with the guidance counselor and her, and the whole time she looked at the guidance counselor like, why is she here? Yeah. I was like, she has to be here. She's like, and she unpacked, she was like, listen, the only two stable males in my life that I trust, social studies teacher, Mr. Njoku, you too. But I don't see you as much, but you be mad busy. But I see him every single day, and he's a good person. And I was just like, wow, this is interesting. Because what she really did was she created a father figure out of him. In her mind, she was like, this is, if I had a dad, this is who I would want him to be like. Yeah. And I remember I've had many hairy situations with parents, but how do you sit with a parent, with a mother, and say, yeah, you don't really know me or him, and we got something to tell you on her behalf. Yeah. But I remember mom sitting there and We both told her, and she sat there, and she broke out into tears. She grabbed her daughter, she was hugging her daughter. And then she said, I just thank God that she had men that she trusted enough to protect her. And I was just like, man, and even right now I'm getting emotional thinking about it, like, that was so bizarre. But one thing is this, sometimes children themselves will tell you what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And what she needed was, you know, in my understanding of things in that situation, is protection.
Mm-hmm.
She needs to feel safe. And her safety was in jeopardy, but she didn't know what her mother would do.
Mm-hmm.
And she picked these two men who were in all reality strangers to her,
mm-hmm.
but familiar to her because we were in her life every day. Like you've said, and I think a lot of you just said, our kids spend so much time in the building with us, you know. So don't think that they're not paying attention,
mm-hmm.
you know. And I had a second story very similar, and I'll make this one really quick. A young lady, attendance issue, not coming to school. Finally, she's in school, and I'm like, okay, we gotta talk. What's going on here? And she was like, okay, mister, I'm gonna tell you what's going on. Mm. She had STD, and she was having flare-ups. Mm. I'm sitting there, and this was the high school. I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, I didn't need to know this. Why are you telling me this right now? But she was like, and she's like, I can't tell my mom. And I'm like, have you been to the clinic? She's like, I know. She's like, I think she was still underage. And she was like, you know, they want my mom to come with me. And I was like, I was just confused about the whole entire scenario. She's like, but I think if you tell my mom for me, she'll understand. Mm. And I was like, how it's the same school. I'm like, what's going on here? All these girls want me to tell. Right. But again, she's another scenario, you know, it's just her and her mom. Mm-hmm. And we got mom to the school, and we sat there, myself, the guidance counselor with the young lady, we talked to the mom, and same response. Mm-hmm. Mom cried. She's like, I'm going to take her to the clinic. We're going to get her help. She's like, thank you, Mr. Njoku. Mm-hmm. At least she had somebody to go to. And I asked myself, why wasn't it to a female teacher? Mm-hmm. And I know everything's unique, but sometimes as men in our classrooms, like you said, we can be nurturing, but we are nurturing. It's called being a father figure.
Right. And it's funny you mentioned that too, because I had two kids in my class. This one girl who every day, from the first day she was in my class, would be trying to hug me, this or whatever. I had a strict no hugging policy for any of my kids. I'm like, all right, y'all got to keep arm's length distance away from me. Not only because of COVID, because I don't know what musty cheese fingers or hot Cheeto fingers y'all got. Get away from me. But I had that policy. One day there was a huge altercation. I wasn't in the class. It was another class. So the way the classes were structured is teachers would go into the room. The kids would stay in the room. So I was in another room. Then all I hear is a brawl basically going on. And then, one of the kids from my class ran to the room I was in and said, Mr. Kabir, you got to come quick. Da, da, da. I never yelled. That's the only time I yelled, but it was more of yo, what are you guys doing? Stop it. They were all shook. She was bleeding from her head. And I had to basically pull her aside because the other girl, we had them glass dividers because the glass dividers were to be COVID safe, right? So I guess air wouldn't go to the next desk or whatever. The other girl took the glass divider from the desk and swung it.
Wow.
This big gash on her head. And that girl with the gash on her head was the one that, always would try to hug me. The other girl was a new student. That girl with the gash on her head at that point was just seeing red. She was on it, she was about to take a pen. She was about to take a ruler, snap it off, and stab this girl. And I'm like, yo, chill. Yeah, and then I took her and I removed her from that, and we were outside on the field. And at that point, she's like, Mr. Kabir, look what she did to me, look what she did. And she's showing me. And, at that point, I felt so bad. I don't know. It's there was a sinking feeling in my chest going to my stomach. And I felt so bad because I'm seeing the blood dripping from her face. And I'm just man, I don't really care if I get blood on my shirt or whatever. I just gave her a hug. I gave her a hug. She started crying. Not the type of crying she was doing before, was a hysterical type of crying. You still want to beat the shit out of somebody. But it was a crying of
release.
There you go. Yeah. And then, I was just hugging her. And I was just it's okay. It's okay. And then I sat her down and I said, it's okay. Don't worry. We'll work this situation out. I just want to make sure you're okay. And then after that, and mind you, we've had interactions in class, and she wasn't the greatest student. She'd do work. Sometimes she wouldn't do work. She'd be on and off. But even with me disciplining her sometimes, yo, you got to do your work. Okay, I have to call your mom, etc. She still felt that she could come to me in that moment, and she felt that I could de-escalate her because that one embrace we had, that was it, nothing more.
Trust.
Which was insane because even me, like, I knew that she liked me and I knew that she trusted me. I just didn't realize it was to that degree. So then after that scenario happened, I realized, I'm like, damn, the impact I probably have with a lot of these kids is far greater than I probably realized. And I feel like that's, similar for a lot of the male teachers that we have.
I think teachers in general need to understand, and I would say most teachers understand this, but I don't think they really understand how deep it goes. A lot of our kids are living in some of the most just heinous situations. And I'm a father right now, and I had my children late. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I look in their eyes and I see how much in, like, for them, I'm the end all be all. It's just like, and I look at them and I'm like, and I appreciate how fortunate I am to have children, but also I also understand how fortunate they are to have me. Because I'm raising them with all the experience of being a teacher, with all other people's children, and all those the love I put out there, and it's not all theirs. But a lot of our kids don't have that. And I'm not saying that their parents don't love them, but it's funny. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we're talking about how poverty is such, man. The levels of poverty I've seen in my career and my time in New York City, and then I've had kids who've come to school and just sat there. I'm like, something's not right.
Yeah.
Something's not right. And you're trying, like, what's going on? I'm good, I'm fine. And you look in your eyes and you're like, my spirit is telling me something's not right here. And I'm one of those people, I'm not gonna push too hard, but I'm gonna, hey, here's a juice. Hey, what's going on? But for me, I can't go home and not know.
Right.
And I've had kids who've just been like, blah, start crying. We have no light. We have no heat. We have no light. I'm like, what do you mean you have no heat, no light? It's like 18 degrees outside.
Yeah.
And you reach out to the family and they're like, yeah, we're trying our best right now. We have blankets and whatever. And you're like, this little kid and the siblings are in an apartment in the Bronx with no heat, they're just blankets in the dead of winter. I remember that winter was one of the coolest winters we had in a long time.
Yeah.
And it was just like, man, like, so our kids are going through so much. And that family, we were able to support them. We reached out to CBO in the community who paid the bills for them and got the lights turned back on. But then I asked myself, how many kids of ours are going through so much? And a lot of times what we're doing is we're so, and rightfully so, but we're so heavily focused on getting through the lesson in the classroom, but not paying attention to their eyes. What's going on here? Because that one kid who will curse you out and act a fool, if you dig deeper, did he eat last night? Did he sleep last night?
Right.
I had a teacher who amazing math teacher. He now works outside of DOE. But he told me, hey, Mr. Njoku, let me tell you what happened this morning. I'm like, what happened? He's like, this morning I'm walking into the building, I'm having a wonderful day. I had my coffee, my bagel, and I see one of my students. I say, good morning, how you doing? And this kid said, fuck you. I took a walking. And I was like,
yeah.
And he's like, my instinct was like, hey, come back here. He said, but I thought about what you told me. It's not about you. So you have to ask yourself, what did you do to that kid in that moment?
Yeah.
He's like, I asked myself, what did I do to him? I did nothing. There must be something else. He said, he said to me, you'd be proud of me. I said, what I did. I planned it out that during lunchtime, I'd find him. He was in my class during the day. I just left him alone. I said nothing to him. Lunchtime, I'm going to go find him. So I found him. I said, hey, how's the rest of your day going? He said, do you know this kid? The first thing the kid said to me is like, mister, I have to apologize about this morning. I was having a bad day. I had a bad argument with my mom, and it's just been too much. And you didn't deserve that. At that moment in time, I was still dealing with that. This was a 7th grader.
Right.
But how many times would a teacher say, you know what? Call the parent. I don't want to hear it. How dare you speak to me like that? And all that. And not understanding, our kids often are going through what most adults can handle.
Exactly.
But we don't give them the grace to really find out what's going on. So that's something that that it, to me is very, very important. You know, regardless if you're male, female, white or black, as a teacher, you have to be able to dig deeper. But one thing I would say is this. Some of my best teachers who have been good at it have been men.
Right.
Have been men. Because we have the ability sometimes to just be like...
Yeah. And you know, it's funny too, because going with that same train of thought you were saying, I realized kids, especially me when I was a kid, you think you're mature, you think you know how to deal with things, but in reality, looking back at it now, I didn't know how to cope with my emotions. I didn't know how to deal with it. So you bottle it up and then eventually you blow up. But then the thing is, as an adult, we know better.
Yeah.
So I like to believe there are no bad kids. They're just misunderstood. It's on us to actually find the meaning in what they're lashing out at and why they're lashing out. They're not going to lash out for no reason. There's a deeper root cause as to why they're doing that.
You got to create the space. You got to create the space and be patient. You know, and that's one thing. We got to create the space and be patient. Sometimes we're just overly reactionary. You know, I'll be honest with you. Early on in my career, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a dean. I was like, punishment, suspended, you this, that. And I learned over time, look at the details. Look at the details and create space. If you create the space, the kids would tell you so much. And then you're able to not only address the issue, but also help them navigate it. So it doesn't repeat itself.
And it's funny because with that, my kids, again, I have that strict no yelling rule. Other than that one instance, but one time my kids thought I was mad at them because another teacher was telling me that they were misbehaving horribly. I didn't tell them anything. I didn't even mention the situation. That whole day, they were quiet. They were cleaning up everything. And at the end of the day, they were like, Mr. Kabir, are you mad at us? Are you mad at us? Are you mad at us? And I said, no, I'm not mad at you. And they're like, are you going to punish us? Are you going to punish us? I'm like, no, I'm not going to punish you. But you anticipating me punishing you and then doing all that just goes to show that I don't even need to do any sort of punishment for you guys to realize what you guys did wrong. You know what you did wrong because you're smarter than you guys think you are. They know what they're doing wrong. But then the thing is, when they get yelled at, that's validating. Oh, okay, we did something bad. They are yelling at us. Cool, let's do it again so they can yell at us again. They like seeing us yell at them.
Or they become defensive.
There you go.
You know, so yell at me. That gives me permission to yell back at you.
Like a self-defense type of thing, you know?
You have to protect yourself and you have to defend yourself. And that's something too that's been very powerful. There's been many times where I've had kids where I just say, you know what? We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Right. And then that waiting, that's what kills them. That's what eats them up inside. It's like, oh my God, what's going to happen next?
You know, but as I progress, I would do like, we'll talk about this tomorrow, but do me a favor. Think about these three things. Over time, it evolved for me because I realized what was more important was the young person in front of me or my students walking away better.
Right.
And not only that, like every situation is a teachable moment. You know, I've had kids that I've had to suspend that I hated the fact that I had to suspend them.
Right.
Because I was like, there were so many other factors, but the rules are very, very clear about this particular thing. But but the thing is, I always made time to talk to them. I'll tell you this right now. I would say maybe in the past 17 years, I would say easily in the past 14, there's never been a situation where a child has done something or there's been an incident where we didn't end up talking about it.
All right.
Like for me, that's something that's very, very important. If I didn't catch you that day, the next day, that's my story. We would sit down and talk. And it wasn't just like come to my office, sit down, let me talk at you. Sometimes we would go get an icy and sit down outside in the yard doing lunch and be like, let's chop it up real quick.
Yeah.
You know, and that was something that was very, very important because at the end of the day, you know, my mantra to my students has been this thing. Your parents send you to the school, you know, especially as me with being the principal or being the assistant principal, they send you to the school with the expectation that I'm going to treat you with the same level of love that they have for you. So that means when 8:30 hits, guess what I become?
Right.
Your mama, your daddy, your uncle, your auntie. I'm your whole entire family. But it's how I'm going to treat you because while you're here under my roof, under my protection, you're a gift from your parents that I gotta take care of. Right. So do understand this. My expectation, their expectation is my expectation of you. You know, and I used to tell parents, I used to say the same thing to parents. If you're going to send your kid to my school, do understand this is how I function. Right. You know, we are now a team. So I would tell parents, listen, if the kid did something, if you want to have a good relationship with me, then let's make this a good relationship. Wait a minute. He didn't do the dishes last night? Let me know. I remind him. Like, yo, Hassan, what happened? You didn't do the dishes last night? Mister, how'd you know? Your mom texted me. You didn't do the dishes last night, But creating that space, is amazing because once kids know they just love from every single angle.
Yeah.
And sometimes love means you might have to do some of the heavy lifting for the families. They're going through so many things that, it's not that they don't love their kids, it's just that they're under so much pressure. So sometimes we gotta balance the scale by adding more love to the scale to make sure.
I feel like sometimes what ends up happening is we all have a certain set of an emotional bandwidth. And sometimes we just have so much in our plate that for us to give more is then running ourselves ragged. So then that's when it's sometimes our responsibility as educators to then help them and kind of make up for that deficit. And the deficit isn't something that's intentional, but it's more so something that is unintentional. But even with that, even teachers now taking on all of that, what happens to their emotional bandwidth?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that right now. And listen, it's funny because one of the things that I really believe is there are two types of teachers. There are teachers who will tell you, this is my job. It's my job. And there's teachers who will tell you, this is my work. Like this is who I am, what I do. And I've always looked for those teachers. Right. I've always tried diamonds in the rough, trying to find those teachers who are like, this is my work. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Those people, for whatever reason, bandwidth is never an issue. Because they live their life serving their students. Right. And it's funny, before I came here, I was visiting I was visiting a school, and I saw a teacher that used to work for me years ago. And I remember thinking to myself, I hired you as a first-year teacher. Look, all these years later, and you can see in his face, this is what I do. Yeah. Like, no question. He was like, you can see in his face. He saw me. He was like, Mr. Njoku, give me an embrace. He's like, man, I'm following social media. That's what you're doing. And I'm thinking to myself, bro, I remember your interview where you were just fumbling and just nervous, like, and I remember observing you in the classroom as a first-year teacher, and you were like, this is a lot. Yeah. And here you are now, and this is not a job for you. This is your work. Because even as I'm talking to him, there's a line of kids waiting to be like, yo, Mr. So-and-so, I can't talk to you about something. And that's the thing. Those of us who, this is our work, bandwidth's never, it's almost like this is supernatural where it's just like, you just can't stop giving. It just keeps on pouring out. And you're right, but sometimes it is a lot. It is a lot. There are times I've gone home and I've just been like, I don't know if I can do this another day. Yeah. But guess what I do the next day? I do another day. Even in my new role now. Yeah. I'm not in the school building, but I spend a lot of time thinking about what? Kids. All right.
I want to pivot now towards your new role, as you mentioned. So you had a lot of experience and tenure within the New York City Department of Education, but now you are with an ed tech company. And so the two questions I want to ask is, one, what do you think about the ed tech space in general? And then two, how has your role, responsibilities, and just your overall perception of education changed since entering the ed tech space compared to your tenure at the Department of Education?
So, first of all, let's establish that when we talk about education technology, it's such a broad spectrum. You have the ed tech companies who just give you software. Right. And it's like everything is just this impersonal digital space. Then you have those who incorporate technology in serving, and it's still a very human touch. One thing that I can say with education is, yes, there's a space for it to happen with the absence of the humanity of teaching and learning, but it's so necessary to have that. And one of the things shifting into my new role, working at Practice, was that it was hard, first of all. Like I didn't realize how ingrained I was, and not even at DOE, but just as a teacher. And one thing I would tell you is I've never ever looked at myself as anything other than a teacher. It just so happens that my role in my school is assistant principal. Well, I'm a teacher. It just so happens my role in the school is principal. But what is a principal? What is a principal? I always tell people, not principal, but principal. What's a principal other than the main one, the head? So for me, as someone who's a teacher, I joined the practice team because of the hands-on approach they have to serving schools. You know, let's be honest here. A lot of schools struggle with the resources of human capital.
Right.
You know, you're a teacher. How many times would you have been like, yeah, man, if I could just have another head,
right,
and 4 other arms, I could do so much more. But a lot of schools are struggling with that, you know. And the thing about this company was, it wasn't just a random, like, I applied for a job. This was a company where I had been using their services in 2 of my schools for a couple of years.
Right.
One, pushing like additional supports in classrooms, you know, utilizing tutors to shrink the student to teacher ratio.
Right.
You know, I've always had great teachers, but as a teacher, you can only do so much with 25 kids.
Exactly.
You know, remember the old adage where in every classroom you could split classes in thirds. The upper third, your middle third, and your lower third. Nonsense. Complete nonsense. You have 25 kids, you have 25 levels.
Right.
Let's be honest here.
Because everyone has their own individual comprehension, different modes of education, and all that.
Learning styles and everything. You can have 10 top students, but each of those 10 students needs to be approached a little bit differently.
Right. You can have some who are auditory learners, some who are visual, some who are kinetic. But the thing is, even though they'll all be high performing, it's kind of like that Albert Einstein quote, right? Like, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking it's stupid.
Exactly. And I love that quote, because so now you have teachers in the classroom who now are now thinking they're stupid.
Right.
They're like, how come I can't move kids forward? You know, because again, you're only one person, and all the best strategies in the world is really hard when the ratio is always high on the student end, and it's only you. You know, on a side note, it's funny, if you look at the top schools in America, all the private schools, the Exeters, the Andovers, you know, the Brownlee, the Trinity School, their student to teacher ratio is insane. 8-1, 6-1. You know, you go on YouTube. There's this YouTube video I was watching that showed all the top schools in the world, all the private schools. I'm like, this school has like 5 kids in the classroom to 1 teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, your tuition is $80,000 a year for middle school, but still, yeah, these kids can really get that level of attention. So practice was an amazing resource for my school, because being able to just bring in additional supports for students, you know, to push in or pull out was was essential. It was essential. And then when I went to the high school level, SAT prep. You know, one of the things that I knew, listen, when I was in high school, I was very, very fortunate. There was some rich funder provided my school with funds to do like a multi-year SAT prep.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And we were heading down to USC. You know, we were from the hood, going to USC campus, sitting there every Saturday for extended periods of weeks, you know, just learning strategies and breaking down SATs and sections and things like that. So when I took the SATs and I got my 1300 out of 16, yeah, listen, I'm not a genius, but I had strategy on my side. Trained over a number of years. So it's funny, because when I became principal at the high school, I reached out to practice. I was like, listen, I have kids here who need SAT prep. You know, it can't just be a couple of weeks before the test, but that's not enough.
Right.
So they were able to put that together. It was virtual and all those things like that. So it's interesting how they're allowed their services are virtual, and you do have in-person services and things like that. But the human approach, even when it's virtual, it's not just software. There's a human being there,
right,
who sees you see them, or over the phone, or whatever the case is, however you're getting your tutoring service. And for me, that was very, very important. So when the opportunity came for me to join their team and work with them, I jumped on it, because I was like, I believe in that. Because I can remember the old, I don't know, I'm dating myself, the Hair Club for Men. These old commercials, the Hair Club for Men, they had like toupees, and the guy would be like, I'm not only the president, I'm a client. You know,
that sounds familiar. I'm going to like a deep recess of my mind.
This is from like the 90s, early 2000s, and I felt like this is a service, a product where I can say I truly understand it because it impacted my students. Listen, last year was my last year as a principal. 100% of my graduating seniors got into college. 100% of them. And yes, there were many factors, but those kids who were able to get that SAT prep for 2 years in a row, 2 years in a row, who volunteered and said, listen, I want the SAT support. That was very helpful for them, you know? So being in this space, working with practice, and again, I say EdTech is such a broad spectrum. They're on the spectrum where we utilize technology to bridge the divide, but the human component is the most essential thing. Right. You know, we provide tutors that look like the kids. You know, they're all from the community. You know, it's one thing for a kid to say I hate school, but what happens when you hate school and the person in front of you is like, yeah, I'm from the same neighborhood you're from. All right. I'm in college, and the kid's like, wait a minute, you're from my same block and you're in college. Maybe I could go to college now. So those kind of spaces. What was the second question?
It was more of like, how has your experience now differed in this current space you're in versus when you're at the DOE?
No different. I'll tell you why it's no different. I mean, on one side it is different because I'm not working in the school building. Right. Okay. I work remote. You know, I'm still trying to get used to that. It's just weird to me. I still get up the same time I got up when I was working at DOE. and I lived in Westchester. I was commuting to Brooklyn. So I had to get up. I had to get up 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning just to be able to, to get to work on time. I still wake up at the same time. It's just that now I am exercising. I've lost 25 pounds since my resignation.
Yeah, you said 40 something. I was like, nah, this dude's lying right now.
No, I'm 46 years old. And I'm like, listen, so the quality of life is different now because of just not having that travel time and those other things. And working in schools is, listen, anybody who thinks that teachers, they're so lucky, you have the whole summers off and you only work, nonsense. It's complete BS. Your day doesn't stop. Have you ever gotten a call in the middle of the night?
Yeah.
From a parent?
Calls in the middle of the night, after hours, odd hours, the weekends.
And when have you ever said, I can't talk to you right now?
Nah, you got to pick up. You know, it's the kids.
Okay. But you think you don't have to pick up. But if you're about the work.
Because you feel that guilt sometimes. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just like, even though you might not be obligated to pick up, your soul might feel obligated. The heartstrings will make you feel obligated.
But it's not guilt. It's not guilt. It's who you are. It's who you are. You know, it's like being a doctor and you're driving by in a car accident. And you're like, I'm late to the hospital. Yeah. What are you talking about? You know, you do no harm. You're going to stop to help to see what's going on. You know, and I think as educators, it's who we are. Let me tell you this. You know how many times I've broken up a fight in the street with kids that I didn't even know in a neighborhood that I'm not from? I'm just like, yo, guys, stop, chill. We can't be doing this. And I'm like, why am I breaking up a fight in the middle of the street? I might get stabbed out here. But for me, it's just who I am. So now, I would say in those instances, it's different. Where it's not different is I'm still a teacher. Right. I still care about what happens to kids. You know, it's just that now I don't work with kids directly. I'm supporting principals. You know, I'm supporting educators and educational institutions and saying, how do we help you provide for your students better? Here's what I did from my experience. You know, it's not just, hey, this is a great product. No, I have empirical data, quantitative and qualitative and experiential data to say, this is how I use these things. But at the end of the day, I don't think I'm ever going to be outside of education. Right. Like some of my posts of some of the things I've said, I've always said this. I'm still who I am, just on a different stage. I'm just performing on a different stage. You know, but at the end of the day, especially now with my own children, I look at them and I'm like, listen, I got to keep working and helping schools get better because one day you're going to be the student in that school. You know, so for me, the changes are like I'm not commuting anymore. You know, I work from home. You know, I can go downstairs and see my son. You know, I take a break. I can walk to the park and take a call, and you know, and he's on the swing and I'm on my laptop. Those things are the things that are welcomed and I'm still getting used to. But when I look in the paper and I see the dropping rate literacy rates across the country, it bothers me. It bothers me because I'm asking myself. I know I read this articles. I look at what areas these things are happening, and they're prominently happening in Black and brown communities. And I'm thinking to myself, I mean, listen. When I saw the drop in rates, I was like, maybe I need to go back. Maybe I need to go back to be a principal. This is what's in my head. I'm like, how do I help? You know, it's like when when 9/11 happened, I knew I had a lot of buddies of mine who were like, they're re-enlisted. Right. Like, I'm going back. I gotta go fight for my country. And I feel like right now in education, I feel the same way. You know, whether at practice or not at practice, I'm always going to be an educator. I'm always going to be an advocate to make sure that we're providing the right tools and resources for our kids, emotionally, psychologically, academically, to be successful. And that's the thing. You know, right now at practice, I feel like I'm literally harnessing all my skill sets from 17 years and trying to figure out ways to better support schools and provide a better product to make sure that no child, I mean, I hate to say no child is behind, but to make sure that every child is met where they are. Maybe that's a better way of saying it.
And it's funny that you mentioned the educator piece, because I feel you wholeheartedly on that. A lot of times I felt as if I was trying to run away from being an educator because I felt, I'm not in the schoolhouse, I don't gotta do it. But no matter what, it's like that, you know, what Thanos did, run from it, dread from it, whatever. It's inevitable. Once an educator, always an educator. Yeah. But with that being said, we are about to wrap up this segment. This has been one of the greatest, most stimulating conversations I've had. Don't tell any of my other guests, because then I'm pretty sure they're gonna come with pitchforks. But with that being said, you know, you could turn to this camera, shout out any of your stakeholders or anyone, you know, near and dear to your heart.
Definitely. I definitely want to give a shout out to to my students over the years, because it's funny, the other day, I want to give a shout out to a particular student, Pete Fields. You know, he's now married, you know, he's in his career. He just changed positions to another company. I shouted him out on LinkedIn, and he hit me up and he said, "Oh man, the GOAT." And I'm like, I'm not the GOAT. You know, every one of my students who committed themselves to their own personal success, you're the GOAT. Because you're the ones who inspired me to do what I do. And I also want to thank every teacher I've ever worked with. Again, I'm going to say this. Teaching is not easy by any means. I don't know anyone who's ever taught an easy class. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know. Yeah. If you're teaching dance, I can't teach dance. You know, my PE teachers, you know what it is to teach a classroom of 60 kids by yourself? You know, so I want to give a shout out to every teacher out there, because at the end of the day, you are the unsung heroes. You know, you are what's critical to society. And I wish we can do more to really, you know, compensate teachers better and really give them everything they need to be successful. And lastly, I really want to encourage men out there. We need more men in the classrooms. You know, and this is not about balancing women and men in education, not at all. Too many of our kids don't have strong male figures in their lives. You know, and I can tell you this, your presence even if it only makes a difference in one kid's life, it means everything in the world. Because I'll tell you this, there's a lot of young men I've come across who've been incarcerated, and they say everything changed for me when I no longer had a strong male figure in my life. My dad wasn't there, or my uncle wasn't there, and I think our schools can serve that gap, could fill that gap for a lot of our kids. But the thing is, it doesn't happen if you don't have more men who are looking to education. So I want to say that, and of course, lastly, much love to my family, to my children, Musa, Nunu, Onua. I do this for you, and that's it.
Damn, what a powerful way to end the episode. But with that being said, that wraps up episode 9 of Education in Color. We will see you guys for the next episode, episode 10, which will be our season finale. Take care, guys.